Start, can you briefly confirm the type of jobs that you're aiming for?
Mostly cybersecurity. So right now I'm working in digital forensics, but I want
Mm.
to. My master's degree is in cybersecurity, investigative forensics, but I really would like to get into the cybersecurity side of it.
I see. And do you also want to focus on cyber forensics as well? Because one of the job listings that you sent me is related to cyber forensic analysis.
Yeah, so I want to keep my resume kind of balanced to do both, and the reason I want to do that is because sometimes you get in malware forensics and you can get into like pen testing and things like that. So part of my cybersecurity would be, I know it's a broad field, but I
Mm.
wanted to keep my resume um, tailored to where I wouldn't be limiting myself to
Sure.
just.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I don't know if that's possible, but like I said, a lot of my background, most of my work experience since I got my master's has been with the investigative side of forensics, and you can see that. I think my resume highlights that, but the
Mhm.
money is not in the investigative side of it; it's in the cybersecurity side of it.
I see. Yeah, we can definitely do that. We can focus on the transferable skills, and these both of these fields are quite related because both of them require a lot of data analysis and collection and then processing. So we can
Okay.
definitely do that. Yeah. And before I move on to your work experience, can you just briefly mention your work philosophy or what you value the most in your profession?
So I think growing, um, learning, education, staying staying consistent with the latest trends and technology out there. I think that's the biggest, I guess,
Mhm.
the biggest challenge with information security. So with jobs, to keep learning, to not get stagnant in one field. So when I say that, I want to be able to grow with a company.
I see. See. Okay. And yeah, that definitely shows with the amount of certifications and courses that you have.
Okay.
Okay.
Did I answer your question? I think sometimes I don't answer people's questions.
Yeah,
But did
definitely.
that? Okay. Yeah, I think learning, having good leadership in work is important for me, and
See.
just moving up. Good leadership is important. I think
Mm.
in this field, having a support group to learn or to learn from.
I see. Okay, great. And okay, so I'll start with your newest experience and end at your oldest one. Does that work for you?
Yes,
Okay, so the first title is as a digital forensics technician. And first of all, do you still work here?
yes. For the Georgia Department of Corrections.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And can you walk me through your responsibilities here?
So what I do is I do digital forensics on mobile devices. So I extract um, data from mobile devices using um,
Mm.
Cellbrite. I also do chip offs where I remove the chip, the flash memory from the device, and I get the raw data.
Mm. I see.
I load those onto the where you see acquired. I acquire the data using FTK Imager UFED 4PC, and then I analyze it doing UFED Physical Analyzer. Um, there, since I come from ICE, there I help train people with the forensic tool, um, and so that's kind of the backbone of what I do there.
I see. Okay. And apart from extracting this data, do you also have to derive the results from it that this will count as evidence because of this reason?
Yes, sir. So what I do is basically analyze images. I look for Say, for example, I look to verify that there's no pictures or anything hidden, or that we're to verify that like the file or the picture, the 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 I drew a blank, but verify that like for example, say that it's a JPEG file. Verify that it is actually a JPEG file and it wasn't actually converted from like a it wasn't converted from like a from another picture. Um, when, so I verified that it's the actual file signature is the file signature for the image or for the document. Verify that like a PDF is a PDF and not a Word document and things like that.
I see. Okay. And with respect to training people, can you elaborate what you trained them on? And I believe you mentioned that you trained them on the software and uh,
Yeah, so I just trained them on how to use the UFAS4 PC. So basically, because the biggest challenge with mobile devices is that there's over 22,000 different Android devices out there, and so what works for one device doesn't always work for another. So my job basically was to help uh, gear people into going a bit step further than just clicking on a button, going in and manipulating. I'm not manipulating, but changing settings to come up with to get a successful download.
and how many people would you say you trained here?
About 5.
Let's see. Okay.
It's not a big group. Very small.
And you mentioned that you have to you kind of have to analyze which method or which software to apply for different devices, right? So can you talk about the ways you the ways you learned the best practices regarding this?
I think that's the best practices is just keep working, not giving up, staying persistent, knowing that it could be something as simple as um, not enough space on the flash memory. So where sometimes you get into a case where the software might need maybe about 5 gigabytes, so it could put its software onto the flash drive. And sometimes because the phone is to capacity, you have to delete you have to delete maybe one or two programs that wasn't relevant or wouldn't have an effect on the case to get the Cellbrite software to work. So just going above and beyond to get to make sure that you troubleshoot. So troubleshooting, I guess that would be a form of troubleshooting.
Okay. And in the document, I believe you mentioned that you didn't have to deal with any cyber threats or risks. So basically, you didn't have to deal with any malware or other vulnerabilities, right?
No, sir. What we run into, what we do run into is that some phones will have malware on there, and so what I would do is I would put signatures into the Cellbrite system to detect malware, and if we thought the malware was something that could have an effect on the computer, I would notify or document it just to let them know. But no reverse engineering or nothing like that. Just loading, just being able to load malware signatures into the program to to discover malware hidden in a device. So Android, for example, like Android malware and things like
that. So not mitigating them, but rather identifying and documenting them, right?
Yes, sir.
See. And can you elaborate on the when you said that technology is always changing and people are trying to obfuscate what they are doing on the internet?
Mm-hmm.
Can you
So
elaborate on that?
Yeah, part of that is where you get into instances where people are using virtual machines to kind of hide their work, or using the dark web and things like that. So how to identify the dark web, how to identify virtual machines, or virtual machine containers, um, where extra where people are trying to hide behind their operating system. So I've had one, not here, but when I was with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, where one guy had 3 virtual machines running within his Windows environment, just to try to hide what he was doing.
Oh, see. Can you elaborate on how you get passed around that? How do you identify that whether someone is on the dark web or using a virtual machine?
Yeah, so part of how I do that is I would look for the containers. So like for example, the VMware, knowing what the VMware container looks like, being able to identify like VMware Fusion or Parallels, the file signature for
Mm.
the VMware container, or that yeah, the container. I call it the container.
Hmm. See. Okay. And are there problems with data integrity or accuracy?
When you say um, so when you uh, accuracy about accuracy um, on the on the on when I do the forensic analysis, I'm not. Can you elaborate a
Yeah,
little bit?
when while doing the analysis.
Hmm. How accurate was I?
I mean, did you have to deal with any corrupt data, or did you have to? I mean, the data wasn't in the right shape or form to be readable, so you had to correct it.
No, nothing. Never like that. Nothing.
See.
Sometimes what happens is with digital forensics is sometimes you get into instances where the date and times don't match. So you have to be able to look at the hex, and come up, figure out um, how accurate the date is. So determine. So I think date and times are the most important, because you might be dealing. Somebody might have a time. Your forensics tool might be set for one time, but then the actual computer is on a different time. So I think date and time accuracies are something that I have to deal with a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. See.
And
Yeah,
then file
and
systems. I think the Windows, looking at like even how just Windows going from Windows 7 to 8, how the date and times um, were handled differently.
let's see. Okay. Mm,
So timestamps or accuracy, that's what
let's
I
see.
dealt with a lot.
And did you suggest any improvements with respect to cybersecurity for your company's internal processes?
No, no, not really, because I haven't really dealt with cybersecurity that much. Like mine has been mostly um, on the investigative side. So when it comes to the cybersecurity side, most of my training has been done using using Linux Academy,
Mm.
um, Cybrary, reading, just doing labs through Linux Academy and things like that. But nothing.
Mm.
I haven't. That's my biggest trouble, has been that I have no experience. Like I haven't got my hands dirty yet.
Yeah, but with regards to cyber forensics, you have a lot of great accomplishments, and we can definitely highlight the skills that can be transferred over to cybersecurity. So that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, that's good to know.
And then, uh, and then you mentioned that you created a procedure on performing a chip off. Can you elaborate what you included in that?
Yeah, so what I did was I created a procedure on the step by steps needed. to do the chip off. So that would mean like from taking photos of the um, of the device to telling explaining the depth and the how to actually how how the process starts from A and then ends with F. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So
Yeah,
just a step
absolutely.
by step procedure on how chip offs, how I do chip offs, or how I think would be the best way to do a chip off.
I see. And was this procedure for the 5 people that you mentioned before, or was it for a larger group of employees?
No, it's for because the lab is getting accredited. So part of the lab accreditation is creating policies and procedures for each for everything that we do. And so since I'm the certified chip off, I'm the main person who does, or I'm the only one that does chip off. We still have to create a procedure and a policy um, to be able to
Oh.
do chip off successfully to satisfy the requirements for the lab accreditation.
Hmm. And were you also in charge of making any other policies except, I mean, except the chip off?
No, sir.
See. And did you have to ensure any compliance with security standards or regulatory compliance?
Yes, sir. So that would be like making sure that the computers are up to date, or the forensic software is up to date.
Okay. And then, you mentioned that you had to, keep the software up to date. So, uh, you also mentioned some things you did to stay ahead of the trends in cybercrimes. Cybercrimes. Can you explain those?
So how to stay update was just attending different webinars that related um, that related to the Cellbrite software on new trends in um, digital forensics. I also am a member of a couple of groups. So a part of that is staying current by reading and attending different groups. Or,
Mhm.
for example, um, where is it at? Hold on, I drew a blank. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. It says
But
International
but
Association of Computer Forensics
yeah,
Investigator.
yeah. So a lot of it, staying current on with, communicating with them. When it comes to cybersecurity, I'm a member of the Pyramid, which is a forum and the 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 cybersecurity um, consortium for minorities. So I'm also a member of that, where I
Mhm.
stay current and chat with different people
I see.
just
Okay,
on the
that's
latest
great.
trends.
I see. That's great. And were you involved in any way in the planning or budgeting of the security operations?
No, sir.
Ah, I see. Okay. And I assume that you had to do frequent reporting and documentation.
Yes, sir. So we have to do reports on our forensics analysis, and we have to present it. Like I just went to court last week.
Ah, I see. Okay. So do you have to go through the whole process of presenting the evidence and proving why the data counts as evidence?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I see. Okay. And before you mentioned that you how you extract data, which software do you use, and things related to that. But can you describe how you decide if certain data counts as evidence?
So part of it would be if so say for example you're involved in like the crime that related to, say for example, somebody hacking a phone. Like most of the stuff we deal with is drugs. We might look at the images, and then we try to look at the images, and then look at the call logs, and see if any of the call logs um, match the time and date stamps of an image. Does that make sense? So we try
Yeah.
things like that.
See. Okay. And you mentioned that you directly dealt with the customers. So,
Yes, sir.
what did you do to maintain customer service or ensure that you were meeting their needs?
So some things that I would do is schedule meetings just to see if the customer was happy with the product. Let them reiterate that if they had any questions, they come talk to me. Just making sure that they understood the the product or the that the product was exactly what they were looking for.
Hmm. See. Okay. And below that, you mentioned that in your resume, you mentioned that you acquired over 10 terabytes of digital media. What were some of the challenges that you had to face when dealing with this much data?
I remember when we first got started, like for example, one thing was that with Windows 7, um, Windows 7, the file allocation table, um, when you went to go try to take a file, was created file or try import to Windows 10, for example, we would get an error. So because for some reason with the first iteration of Windows 7, the file allocation, FAT32, um, didn't allow you to copy the file size, like the file character limits that was in Windows 10 wasn't the
Hmm.
same in Windows 7, so you would get an error. So part of to troubleshoot that, what you had to do was you had to use a command prompt to copy the file versus just copying the file and pasting it into Windows 10. So those were some one of the biggest challenges. Like you would go to put a case
Hmm.
on like a thumb drive that was formatted with Windows 10, but the original case was done on Windows 7, and you would get an error. So
I
just
see.
figuring out that.
See. And I assume there also must be challenges with respect to uh, gathering evidence, gathering data that counts as evidence from all of this, from this huge amount of data, right?
Yes, sir. So it was like the challenges I think with when you're dealing with like 10 terabytes of data is something like that. Is just making sure that the data doesn't get corrupted.
Mhm.
Just making sure that it doesn't get fragmented and things like that. Making sure that you back it up. Um, I remember when we first got started, we was using like a RAID, um, the making sure the RAID for redundancy, but we didn't have a backup set up. So if the RAID went down, even though we had the RAID, it really wasn't getting backed up. So learning from that, learning that even with redundancy, still need backup.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I think I have a lot of great information. And uh, can you think of any other major accomplishment related to this experience?
um, just always backing up. I think important is to making sure, like even with cybersecurity, making sure you have a good backup, making sure that some things go wrong. And so I think
Mm.
even with cybersecurity, even with viruses, having a good backup, um, encryption, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, would it be okay if I moved on to the next experience?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so your next title is as a computer forensics analyst at Immigration's Custom Enforcement, and before that, you were a child recovery operative, right?
Yes. Yeah, I was before. Yeah, so I worked at ICE, and then before that, I worked at Shawn Systems.
See, and were you promoted to computer forensics analyst from the recovery operative position?
No, no, sir. So at the Immigration and Custom Enforcement, I was a intern to do digital forensics for 1 year.
See. Okay. Yeah, so can you talk about your duties as a computer forensics analyst?
Yeah. So what I did there is as a computer forensics analyst, I would look at well, I would go on search warrants and recover evidence on site. So I would do on